Hello, comparative religions, and welcome to the one lesson that we're going to have this week. Remember, your Native American projects are due, and we're going to be presenting those on Thursday and Friday. Everybody, my hybrid students and my online students, need to do this lesson on their own. It's a real brief lesson, and it's going to talk about the development of monotheism. Then next week, we're going to start looking at our monotheistic religions in detail. We're going to start with Judaism. So let's talk about why monotheism develops, okay? Now, keep in mind, so far in this class, we've talked about our animism, okay, naturalistic polytheism, the belief in nature spirits. Then over time, those spirits morph into the gods and goddesses, and we've talked about Greece and Rome and Egypt. We talked about Hinduism, okay? We looked at the religions of Asia, which deal a lot with spirits, okay? Even though they aren't necessarily gods or goddesses, there's still this idea of spirits out there. So monotheism is going to challenge a lot of people's ideas about religion and about the world around them. Okay, so for the first question, why does monotheism develop? Okay, now notice as we go through these, all right, I put question marks beside each one because depending on your faith background, you might disagree with some of these. Okay, so that's why I put question marks in parentheses. And I do want you to get down all four of these possible reasons that monotheism developed. Number one, it's easier. Okay. First off, you only have to worry about one God to worship. And we talked about in terms of like Greece and Rome, how sometimes the gods appear very, very fickle. And how do you know you're making all the gods happy? You might be doing what you're supposed to do for this god, but then this other god is going to get upset. He's going to punish your city for some reason. So a lot of people think monotheism is easier. There's only one God. Your faith is centered around that one God, and that tends to reinforce community. And we talked about that at the beginning of the semester. That's one of the benefits of religion is religion creates a sense of community. Okay? Some people say it's more simplistic. All right? Because you have the one God. Now, that being said, there are people that are going to argue because a lot of times when you say it's simplistic, people think it's negative, okay? But there are going to be people that argue against that because all the traits of all the gods are combined into one. And some people believe it's much harder to keep that one God happy than it is to keep multiple gods and goddesses happy. Okay. So again, that's why I had the question mark there beside it. So could be easier. It could be more simplistic. It's the correct faith. In fact, this is the big one for monotheists. Okay. Ours is the correct faith because there is only one true God. Okay, the faith teaches that. In fact, that is what reinforces the community is the belief that there is one all-powerful God. Okay, and of course, if you're a follower of polytheism or you believe in nature spirits or whatever, you're going to disagree with that. That's why it's a little question mark beside it. And then finally, sophistication. It shows the progression of man. Okay, instead of worrying about all these fickle gods and goddesses out there or attributing every little natural occurrence to a different god or goddess, we have reached the conclusion that there's only one god or goddess out there. That has shown our sophistication. We're moving away from superstition, so to say. Okay. But these are the four reasons that contribute to the development of monotheism. It's easier, more simplistic, it's the correct faith, and it's more sophisticated. Okay. Now, we're going to focus on Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. There are other monotheistic faiths out there that have developed over time. Okay. And I want you to get a couple of these down. Okay. We've already talked about one of them. All right. Monotheism happens more than once. All right. However, these early forms are not lasting. All right. The one we talked about is the first one, Amenhotep. Okay. Remember, he was the Egyptian pharaoh. He lived around the 1500s BCE. He got the Egyptians to believe in the one God, the sun god Aton. All right. In fact, he and his believers move out into the desert and they construct a whole city and a whole civilization around. Civilization is probably too strong of a word, but they form a whole culture around this belief in Aton, which was very revolutionary in Egypt because we know that Egypt was a polytheistic society. However, when Amenhotep dies, most of the people return to the polytheistic ways, okay, the belief in many gods and goddesses. So in the end, this belief in one God is rejected by most. I mean, Amenhotep only had a small group of believers, and then when he's gone, everybody else kind of drifts back to their polytheistic tendencies, okay? The second one, Zoroastrianism, that is in Persia around the 5th century BCE. Now, Zoroastrianism is characterized by free worship. Okay. So while it tends to be monotheistic, again, it's based on a belief in personal freedom. Okay. So I'm not going to say it wasn't completely monotheistic. There probably were some polytheistic tendencies in there as well. But Zoroastrianism is the first to suggest a judgment day and heaven and hell. Okay. You need to know that. Zoroastrianism is the first to suggest a judgment day and heaven and hell. Now, again, because it's characterized by free worship, over time, a lot of these followers of Zoroastrianism are going to disappear, okay? Some of the beliefs, like Judgment Day and Heaven and Hell, are going to be morphed into other set belief systems. We mentioned Buddhism. There's a sect within Buddhism that believes in a Judgment Day and Heaven and Hell. That's a good example, okay? So because there's free worship, over time, this belief system kind of molds into others or melds into others. And then we get the Hebrews, and we're going to talk more about them next week. The Hebrews are the first true believers in monotheism, in that this is the group that gets monotheism to stick. These are the founders of Judaism around 1700 BCE. It is the most influential form of monotheism because, like I said, it is the one that stays around. And we're going to see that Christianity and Islam have their roots in Judaism. Okay, so the three monotheistic religions that are still around today tie back to the Hebrews and the founding of Judaism, which is the first major monotheistic religion that is still going to be practiced today. Now, when monotheism develops, it encounters challenges and it causes challenges. So the last slide that we're going to look at, and I want you to get these four things down, we're going to talk about challenges to monotheism, and in a way, they're challenges of monotheism. Okay? Most of these occur at the time of their development because the idea of worshiping one god or goddess is so radical. Okay? So the first big challenge is going to be persecution. Members are victimized for their beliefs. The Jews are a persecuted people. In fact, we're going to talk about this when we get to Judaism. That's one of the signs that they believe they are the true faith, because they face persecution. That's part of their God has chosen them to be persecuted because of their belief in God. Okay? So a lot of times monotheists are victimized by their beliefs. We're going to see the same thing with Christianity. We're going to see the same thing with Islam. Now, what's interesting is that once some of these groups gain power, then they're going to turn the tables and they're going to start persecuting those that persecuted them. Okay, and we'll talk more about that when we get to each individual one. Exclusivity. Because you believe you are the correct faith, monotheists are often not accepting of outsiders. And even though most of the monotheistic religions, in fact, I would probably argue all the monotheistic religions teach some form of peaceful interaction with those around you, okay, especially when it comes time to try to proselytize your beliefs. because they appear as non-accepting because they believe they're the only correct religion. That's going to lead some people to shy away, and that's ultimately going to hurt their proselytization because they gain this reputation of not being accepting of outsiders and not being accepting of others. Okay, so not only, and sometimes that is well founded. So again, this is going to be a challenge to monotheism because people are going to start rejecting it because they say you're not accepting, but at the same time, in some cases, they aren't accepting of others, and that's going to hurt their proselytization. Okay, so again, as we go through these, there are challenges to monotheism and of monotheism. Western bias. Okay, Western culture seems to view their systems and ideas as superior. So, especially when we get to Christianity, when the kings and queens of Europe convert to Christianity and then have a desire to spread Christianity around the world, okay, not only is that going to fuel some of their explorations and colonizations, okay, but once again, that's also going to cause some people to reject monotheism and especially reject Christianity because they associate it with Western bias and this idea that the Western cultures are superior to everybody else. Okay. And then finally, acceptance. All right. And we see this in Egypt. It is difficult to accept new ideas over old traditions. When Amenhotep passed away, it's not surprising that his followers revert back to polytheism. It is difficult to accept new ideas over old traditions. Okay. And we're going to see this with Judaism. We're going to see this with Christianity. It goes back to the persecution. You've got these people preaching one God. A lot of people are going to find that hard to accept. Okay. And that's going to lead to the persecution. All right. On both sides. Okay. Not only is it going to lead to the persecution of the monotheists themselves, but then, like I said, once those monotheists gain power, then they're going to start persecuting others who won't accept their beliefs. So the four challenges to monotheism: persecution, exclusivity, Western bias, and acceptance. Now, real briefly, that is what we're dealing with as we move into the main monotheistic faiths today. Like I said, next week we're going to talk about Judaism. We're going to talk about the Holocaust as well. Then we'll move into Christianity, and then we'll move into Islam. And we'll talk about how these challenges factor in to the development of those religions and how those religions are going to use these challenges and how they impact the world around them.